Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Hope you guys are having a great start to your summer. Today I'm going to be showing you how I set up my bullet journal for July, and I'm going to have a fun sunflower theme along with some collage elements. So let's get started. So starting with my cover page here, I sketched out a quick illustration with some sunflowers. So I have 3 different flowers here, and I wanted to do flowers in different sorts of angles just to make it more realistic. So I'm starting with the first sunflower here, and you can see it's sort of tilting to the side a little bit. And sunflowers are pretty easy to draw. You just have to draw this like circle or oval shape in this case since it's facing towards the side. And then you just have a tapered petal. And you can see I also drew a petal sort of folded in over just so again it looks more realistic, and I'll be doing this in some of the other flowers as well. And you want to create a few layers of petals around your circle just to make it look like a really full sunflower head, so it looks really lush and beautiful. And I also drew a couple of larger tapered shapes behind these petals, and these are going to be leaves. Then I drew a stem coming from the head of the flower, sort of curved a little bit, and drawing a couple of leaves coming off of that stem as well. The leaves are pretty similar to strawberry leaves actually, so if you were here for last month's theme, you'll know how to draw those. It's sort of like a tapered leaf shape with some very slight ridges on the edges, and I also drew some veining detail inside of that as well. And that pretty much finishes off the first flower, not too hard. We are going to add color to this later on just to make it look a little more three-dimensional, but the outlines of it are pretty easy. So moving on to the next flower. This one I wanted to have facing away, so you're sort of seeing like the back of the flower. So the way to draw this is to just draw a little V shape, and then you're gonna draw a bunch of little V shapes facing downwards and upwards. And this is going to be the part of the flower that sort of goes around the petals on the back, if that makes sense. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here and recreate that. And then I'm going to be drawing a few petals, again coming from the back. And these don't have to be too perfect since it is just the back of the flower. And I more so just have this flower just to fill in the space a little bit and not to have too many big full flowers that would just compete with each other. So I wanted to have the flower next to it be the focal point of that corner of the page. And then on the other corner of the page, I'm going to have another really nice big flower that you're seeing from straight on. So that's what I'm working on here, and you'll see again, I drew a couple of petals folding in over the circle of the flower, and I just think that it makes it look more real and adds more interest so that you don't just have a bunch of the same type of petal. And then again, I drew a couple of larger shapes that are going to be leaves. It's kind of hard to differentiate right now, but once you add color, it'll be a lot more obvious. And then I tucked in a little leaf coming out from behind that flower head as well. Now I'm just going to scatter some illustrations of sunflower seeds because I thought that would be perfect, and I just like adding little elements around the page like this. Because I didn't want to draw, 10 different small sunflowers, but having the sunflower seeds is a nice little element to still go really well with this theme. So now that the illustration is done, I'm going to bring in the color, and I'm using my Crayola Super Tip markers, and I just took out a bunch of shades of yellows and oranges, and I wanted to do some nice shading on these petals. It's nothing too hard, but it does add some more dimension and detail to these flower illustrations to really make them come to life. So to start off with this process, I start with the darker color for each of my flowers. So for this one, it's sort of like a darker orange color, and I just scribbled a little bit of that color sort of towards the center bottom of each of the petals, and then I take my lighter color and go right over that and sort of blend it out. If you do this pretty quickly, the colors actually do blend really well with these markers. I'm pretty impressed with how great these markers work in that way, even though they're super affordable markers. If you have another type of marker that's even fancier, like Tombow dual brush pens or something like that, those should also blend out really well. So just try to work with what you have. And then to move on to the center of the flower head, I drew a darker area right in the middle. And of course, the inside of a sunflower has a bunch of sunflower seeds in it, and these usually have a lot of texture inside the flower head. So what I did was I sort of scribbled with a brown marker, and I didn't want to fill it in completely. I left plenty of white spaces, as you can see, and I think this is just a really quick way to add texture. It doesn't have to be perfect, you don't have to see every individual seed, but I think just adding an irregularity helps it to look like there's something a little more going on there. And then I also use my marker and kind of dot it around the outer ring as well to create this feeling of texture without doing too much detail work. For the leaves and the stems, I took a darker green and outlined around the illustration marks and then blended that in with a lighter green just to create a little bit of color definition and contrast so it's not all one color. And to color in the flower next to it, I wanted to pull out some darker, more muted colors for the petals just because it is the back of the flower, and like I said, I don't want this one to be too vibrant to compete with the one next to it. So I brought out a sort of brownish orange color, a little bit darker than the orange that I used before, and then I'm blending that out with the yellow. You can see this makes it look more like it's in the shadow since it is the bottom of the flower. And then I'm just finishing off those leaves, as I mentioned earlier, just outlining it with the darker marker and then filling it in with the lighter one. Moving on to the flower at the bottom, I'm just coloring in the leaves the same way, and you can see here how I'm differentiating those larger petals so that it's obvious that they're the leaves behind the flowers and not just 3 random large petals, and hopefully that makes more sense what I was describing before, to have sort of like this collar of leaves going around the head of the flower. Since this is my biggest and most lush of all of the flowers, I wanted this one to also be the most vibrant in color. So for this one, as my darkest color that I'm using in the center of the petals, I started off with a red, a bright red, and I'm outlining that with a little bit of the orange and then finishing off with the yellow. You can see I kind of split the petals into different sections this time because it's best to work in smaller areas at a time so that you can blend out the colors while they're still a little bit wet. If you let them dry completely on the page, then they don't blend out super well. But if you do it quickly, then I find that it works pretty well. And I like this technique of starting with the darker color and using the lighter color to blend that out instead of putting a base of lighter color and then working your way to the darkest. I just think that this way blends a little bit better. I really love this color combo for that flower. It's just a really nice, vibrant, and summery sunflower. And now to finish off with the middle, I'm going to again scribble in that brown marker, and then I'm taking my micron pen and adding a little bit of that detail work on the inside of the flower. So if you look at photos, sunflowers often have these like concentric circles almost of pattern inside, so that's what I'm trying to do here. And again, I'm using the point of my marker and creating like these polka dots like I mentioned, and then also using my brown marker as well just to soften it up a little bit. The sunflower seeds are very, very easy to color. I just took a gray marker and did a couple of stripes going up around the curve of the seed, leaving plenty of white space. You do want that definition and contrast there, otherwise it won't look like a sunflower seed, it'll just look like a gray blob. And I did already have some of that detail striping with my micron pen, but I used gray and black markers to sort of darken that effect a little more. So now to go in and create a frame for this illustration, I'm using my pencil and just lightly sketching in an oval shape. And then I'm going to take a purple marker. You can use any color you want. I just thought this would look really nice with the yellow of the sunflowers. And I'm just taking that marker and roughly sketching in that oval shape. Not being too careful. I am totally okay if there are some white marks because I like that painterly look. But you can feel free to color this in as a perfect shape if you want to. And this month I really wanted to do something a little different, and instead of just having straight illustration in all of my pages, I wanted to incorporate other elements and create more of a collage style. So I brought out a bunch of little things from my stationery stash. I'm sure you guys all have a stash that you can dig into for this. So I pulled out washi tape, I ripped out a page of an old book, I have letter stickers, just all sorts of little things that you'll see here, and I'm just creating a nice little layout. This kind of brings me back to my scrapbooking days where I did this a lot. And if you've never done something like this, then this is a great time to just play around and have fun with it. But you can see how I'm just layering a couple of different elements here. I really like the look of this old book page that I added. Just that tiny little piece adds a lot of texture and gives this page more of a vintage look. And if you don't have an old book that you can use like this, you can try staining your stationery or some graph paper with some tea. That's a really fun thing I used to do when I was younger, and it's just a really fun way to get that effect. Moving on to the calendar page, I'm starting off by outlining the shape of the calendar days, and then I'm completely filling that in with black. I know this seems a little bit crazy, and it did take a little bit, but I absolutely love the effect of this. It's just something completely different and really pops out in your journal if you've never done this before. It's a really striking look, and I think it works really well with the collage style as well, which you'll see in a little bit. So after I colored in this very large shape, I went ahead and drew in a couple more sunflower drawings. So in the bottom left corner, I have one of those straight on flowers, and then at the top left, I have another sunflower that's sort of tilted to the side with a slightly curved stem. And I'm leaving a little bit of space on the left side for me to include, again, some collage details and also more letter stickers for my July title. I'm gonna go ahead and color these in the same way as I did in the previous spread, and just use different shades of oranges, yellows, and a little bit of red in the bottom flower to color those in. And by the way, I know you're probably worried about if this big black box is going to bleed all over in your journal and go completely through to the other side. And I checked this after everything was done and this was all dry, and it actually didn't bleed at all for me. I had a little bit of ghosting, and that's to be expected with such a large area of black. But honestly, it just looks like a shadow on the page, and it's more uniform than if you were to do a drawing on the other side. So it actually turned out pretty smooth, and of course this might differ with the markers that you use. I just used my black super tip marker, and I'm using a Leuchtturm 1917 journal. So depending on the thickness of your pages and how inky your pen or marker is, it might be an issue, but for me it was not a problem at all. Once the coloring was all done and the black ink has had time to dry, I went in with my white gel pen to just letter in the days and draw in my grid. You definitely don't want to do this while the black ink is still wet. Just make sure it's completely dry, otherwise it won't turn out as bright white and it'll sort of fade into like a grayish color. Now I'm going to add in some collaging details to the page. So I have another little piece of my old book that I've cut a straight edge on, and I'm putting it next to my large calendar, and that straight edge makes it look like it's tucked in behind the calendar, which is really cool. And I also found this piece of patterned paper that's sort of like a vintagey looking graph or chart, and I like how this is a very neutral color and pattern, so I can actually use it as a box for me to write my to-do list in for the month. So I love that it's part of the design and adds to the texture and color, but it's still totally practical. And if you don't have patterned paper like this, again, like I said before, you could try staining something yourself to have that vintage look, but if not, you can also just draw in a box as normal, and that would look totally fine as well. Then I finished off with a couple of little stickers and washi tape pieces that I found in my collection. I would really encourage you to just go through what you have, all your stationery and stickers and everything, and see what you can incorporate into your page. I hope that these layouts gave you some inspiration for what you could do and maybe encouraged you to go a little bit outside of the normal and outside of your comfort zone. These are definitely pages that are very different from what I've done before, but I love how they turned out, and sometimes that's just the fun of your bullet journal and exploring your creativity. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want more bullet journaling videos. Today I only showed you my first couple of pages for July, but I'm going to have more pages and weekly spreads coming up next week, so make sure you have your notification bell on so you can see when that video comes out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.